Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede. In addition to the presidential race and the constitutional amendments on abortion and marijuana, voters will also decide in November whether Republican Rick Scott should remain in the United States Senate. It is one of the races that will determine the balance of power in the Senate, and the Democrat leading the race to try to challenge him in November is former Congresswoman Debbie Mucarsel-Powell, who is here with us in studio. Thank you for coming in. Let's just dive right in. We premiered last Sunday a new poll from CBS that has the race right now with Rick Scott at 45 and you at 37. Clearly, it's a name ID issue. People are still getting to know you. What's your assessment of Rick Scott ahead of you right now in the polls?
So, you know, we still have a few months before the election, and I have been touring the state, introducing myself to people in the northern parts of the state that really didn't get to know me. I know a lot of people here in South Florida have had the opportunity to get to know about me because I was elected in 2018. So I'm not paying too much attention right now to the polls. We still have months ahead, and I will continue to tour around the state. The interesting part of that poll, though, is that Rick Scott has hit his ceiling. This man has been in office for over 14 years, and what I keep hearing around the state is that they don't want Rick Scott back in the Senate. He has done nothing for Floridians. People are very disenchanted with his past, with everything that he's done when he was governor, and now in the Senate, he really has done nothing except vote against any sort of bipartisan bills that would help the people of Florida. So
one of the things that he announced this week is that he is going to try to become the Senate Republican leader, replacing Mitch McConnell. Your reaction to that?
Well, first of all, a little arrogant in his part. He hasn't even been reelected, and he's already making plans to become leader. He lost that race already. I would assume that people wouldn't support him, but it's extremely dangerous. This race has become much more critical than ever, because what would the Senate look like with Rick Scott being the leader of that group? He wants to eliminate Social Security and Medicare. He has been very vocal about repealing the Affordable Care Act. He wants to raise taxes on middle-class families, and he's been on the air defending that stance. So he would be a disaster to families, not just here in Florida, but across our country.
Well, let's get into it. What do you believe is the driving issue that is going to motivate voters in this race, and what are you playing to more than anything?
Yeah, as I've been traveling, for months now, everywhere I go, whether it's in Gainesville talking to students at UF, Orlando talking to seniors, it's the affordability crisis that we're facing. People in the state of Florida can't afford to live here. I spoke to a senior that has to go back to work because he can't pay for his property insurance bills. Students can't actually afford to pay rent. They have to live at home with their parents. And so I just released an affordability plan because we need to find solutions to these issues. I strongly feel that in order for this state to continue to grow, to continue to show economic progress, we have to tackle the affordability crisis.
One of the things, though, that we showed in the CBS poll that I thought was really telling and a problem for Democrats overall, we asked them, if Trump wins the presidency, will you be financially better off or worse off? And 47% believe they will be financially better off. A much smaller number think that they'll be worse off. Most think that it may not have any effect. If Biden wins, though, 52% of Florida voters, said they believe that the financial situation will be worse under Joe Biden. How do you buck those headwinds to convince voters that you, as a Democrat, actually have a formula for helping the affordability issue?
It's interesting because we all know that the data is showing that there is economic growth, but the reality is that the people are not feeling it because of big oil. We're seeing gas prices continue to go up, and I was just talking to someone. I'm the person that is looking for the different gas stations. Where can I, save a little bit on my gas tank? And Rick Scott has absolutely no idea. He's so out of touch. He's the wealthiest senator in Washington. He continues to use his position to enrich himself. So he's done nothing to try and help families here feel some relief. We had an infrastructure bill that would bring jobs to Florida, and he voted against it. Over $1 billion voting against this bill.
Well, give me a sense for, I've looked at your plan, to lower costs for Floridians. Give me an idea. One of the things that you talk about is expanding the child tax credit. I will tell you that the Scott campaign hits back and sort of says that you had an opportunity to do that with a bill a few years ago, and you didn't come out in support of it.
Actually, it was Democrats that introduced the child tax credit, and what he's talking about is the tax bill that gave tax cuts to the wealthiest, the top 0.1%, and then
Tax Cuts and Jobs Act.
Exactly,
right.
Exactly. That's what he's referring to. That's the bill that he wants to continue to support. But let's look at his 6 years in the Senate. What has he done? And the response to that is nothing. You can't trust Rick Scott to do anything to find relief for working families in the state of Florida. And so I released this plan, which would lower the cost of property insurance rates. There's a bill on the House that doesn't have a Senate companion, which would reduce prices by 25%. We need to keep the reduction of medicine. We negotiated that when I was in the House, lowering prescription drug prices. What does Rick Scott want to do? He wants to repeal those costs that were lowered, that caps insulin at $35, instead of continuing to work with pharmaceutical companies. And so he's someone that will say anything to get reelected. He wants to maintain power because he has ambitions.
Well, I want to play for you. This is one of the ads that he is currently running, and this is sort of the tenor and tone of his campaign. Let's play that now, and I want to get your reaction on the other side.
We teach values to our children, the difference between right and wrong, truth and lies. But then we send our kids to school where some radical socialist teacher doesn't teach them math or English. No, they're taught that men can have babies and become women, and that we should worship the God of government, not the God who created us. That is socialism.
I'm not even sure. I don't know what school he's referring to. I don't know what school is teaching that men can have babies, or that God is socialist, or whatever. But this is the nature of the campaign that's going to be run against you, is by just proclaiming socialism. That's worked in the past in Florida, though.
Look, Rick Scott has become the poster child of radical extremism in Washington, D.C. He's much more aligned with Marjorie Taylor Greene, with the Freedom Caucus, than he is with regular Floridians trying to make it. We have a teacher shortage. I actually have received messages from teachers. They are outraged that he is insinuating that teachers are not taking their profession seriously. They're underpaid. They need support and resources to be able to teach our kids so that they can face the challenges coming ahead. And what is Rick Scott doing? Using false advertisement with the money that he took from committing Medicare fraud. Let's be honest here. And it's insulting for someone like me that left Latin America, leaving and understanding what socialist dictatorships look like, coming here seeking for freedom, and then having someone like Rick Scott, who has been stealing funds from the government, use that money to lie to Floridians. So let me just say, I am ready to debate him on this issue and any other issue, and teachers will be with me. They are insulted by that ad. I
want to get your reaction to a couple of things that was in the news this past week. The TSA, the federal government, allowed Cuban officials to tour Miami International Airport on May 20th of all day, Cuban Independence Day. Did the Biden administration make a serious mistake here?
Look, this is a federal agency that should have coordinated with the mayor, with local elected officials, including Rick Scott. You know where Rick Scott was on May 20th when this occurred? Here in Miami. You're telling me he had no idea that this was happening? It also occurred under Carlos Jimenez a couple of times, but it's completely outrageous. I mean, there should be at least some sort of communication with the local elected officials. And it seems to me that Rick Scott is much more preoccupied on attending a trial in New York City, attacking the judge and his family, than paying attention what's happening here in his state, and it's dangerous.
I think, you know, when we talk about the issues in this campaign, I think Democrats were really hoping and believing that the abortion issue would be a game changer. I know that early on you also made some statements where you basically said this will completely change the dynamics of the race. Again, the polling suggests abortion is not the driving factor today. To get people to the polls. The economy is, and that people will decide their votes based on the economy. Where do you see abortion fitting into this race?
Jim, I think abortion is a top issue regardless of what the polls are showing. I've been talking to a lot of Floridians. I had a conversation with a 72-year-old man. I asked him, what's your top issue? And he said it was abortion. And I was surprised when he said that to me. And he said his aunt had died before Roe v. Wade, and it had devastated his entire family. And he has 2 daughters. And for him, he wants to do everything in his power to protect those freedoms for women. This is central to our health care. This is central to the dignity of a woman, to make that decision between herself, her doctor, her family, her faith, without politicians like Rick Scott interfering in that decision. It's extremely dangerous. Rick Scott wants to push a national abortion ban. He has his name on the bill. He said on day one that he would sign any abortion bill that comes to his desk if he goes back into the Senate. And we know that it's linked to a high rate of violence against women. As a mom of 2 daughters, I'm very concerned that we are now living in a state where our daughters are not going to have access to critical health care. And let me just share this other story, Jim. I had a roundtable with many women. One of them was a Colombian older woman. Her daughter, when she was pregnant, at 16 weeks, the doctor said that the fetus was not developing properly. And it was a very difficult decision for her daughter to have to face the termination of that pregnancy. But she was so grateful that she had that access to that critical health care. And she was crying, sharing the story to me. And so I believe that this will be one of the top 2 issues in this race. And we're seeing it as we talk to young students, to young people, to women, and it's not political.
Give me your sense as to why you think Democrats have struggled in the state of Florida for a while. The last statewide Democrat to be elected was Nikki Fried to the agriculture office. Before that, Bill Nelson. Governors going back at least 2 decades. Why are Democrats having such a problem getting their message across in Florida?
I think it's a variety of reasons. I talked about this after 2020. There has been a lot of disinformation targeting our communities that we didn't realize was happening. That's one reason. But I also feel that we haven't made the investments to be able to communicate directly to voters on the issues that matter to us, that we want to advance, that will help them and make their lives just a little easier. We haven't had investments in voter registration. We haven't had investments in voter turnout. And that's the result. We saw it in 2022, but this is going to be a completely different cycle. I do want to ask before we wrap up, if you are elected to the United States Senate, would you continue to fund both weapons for Ukraine and for Israel? And I'd like to hear your thoughts as to what Israel is doing in Gaza and whether or not you're supportive of the way Netanyahu has handled this. I've been very clear from the beginning that my husband's Jewish, and I've been always a very strong supporter of Israel. I did when I was in Congress, and we need to continue to support Israel and its right to defend itself. I'm extremely concerned in the rise of anti-Semitism. There are so many families that have children in these colleges where we've been seeing these protests where they fear for their safety because of the rise in anti-Semitism, and we have to denounce all forms of hate. I feel very strongly about that. When I was in Congress, I voted to send aid to Israel. I think that we need to support our allies that are fighting for democracy abroad. Rick Scott voted against aid to Israel, not once but twice.
Are you concerned?
He has voted against aid to Ukraine, extremely dangerous.
Are you concerned, though, about the way Israel is prosecuting the war in Gaza?
I think that we have to do everything in our power in the United States to make sure that those hostages are returned. And I know some families that lost lives, that this woman that lost her niece and her nephew, and one of the children of this couple was taken hostage, a 3-year-old. We need to do everything to release those hostages. That comes first, but we have to protect civilian life. As a mother, as someone that has been watching those images, it is incredibly hurtful to see children that are dying. We have to do what we can in our power to send humanitarian aid to Gaza, and at the same time try to find a way to end the war, but not before releasing the hostages.
Right. I got to cut it off here. Again, you're welcome back. We'll continue these conversations as voters try to sort through all this. I do think this is an important election, and I don't think it's one that's already been decided. Yeah. So we'll see. All right. When we come back, we will be joined by the chair of the Florida Republican Party, Evan Power. Stay with us. Welcome back. Evan Power has been the chair of the Republican Party of Florida since January, after the previous chair, Christian Ziegler, was forced out in a sex scandal. Since taking over the party, he has continued to grow the voter registration advantage for Republicans in the state, believing that by Election Day, there will be 1 million more registered Republicans in Florida than there are Democrats. I had a chance to speak to Evan Power by Zoom while he was visiting Israel. Evan, thank you very much for taking the time. I know that you're in Israel right now, and I want to talk to you about your trip in a minute, but I want to start with the politics here in Florida. You know, as you know, the CBS News poll recently came out that showed that Donald Trump ahead of Joe Biden in Florida by 9 points, 54-45. But it also showed that a vast majority of Floridians think the 6-week abortion ban is too strict. Do you think that the abortion issue may come back and bite you in the butt on some of these down ballot races?
No, I don't think so. I think what you look at is it's not one of the most important issues facing Floridians. They care about the economy, they care about inflation, and they care about immigration. And I think that's what people are going to be voting on.
All right. So right now, I think that you have, what is it, about 800,000 or 900,000 registered voter advantage in the state of Florida?
Yeah, it's a little over 900,000.
And you believe that you're going to grow that to 1 million before Election Day?
That is our goal. I think we're either going to get there or get very close.
And tell me why you think Republicans have been doing so much better at getting folks registered than the Democrats are. What is your secret sauce, in your opinion?
Well, I think we have leaders that have delivered on the promises that they made in the campaign season. And so people are excited to be Republicans. They're excited to move to Florida to be Republicans. And we're seeing the success of what we've delivered here as an agenda in Florida.
I do want to go back and just ask you again about the 6-week abortion ban, because, again, more than 56% of Floridians said that they believe the 6-week abortion ban was too strict. Was the 6-week abortion ban a mistake?
I don't think it's a mistake, and I don't think it's an issue that voters are going to vote on.
Okay. I do want to get your reaction to a couple of things going on here. I'm sure you've been keeping up with the news. And one of the things is the TSA had a delegation from Cuba come to visit Miami National Airport on May 20th, Cuban Independence Day of all days, to tour some of the facility. Apparently, this is not the first time it's happened. It happened in 2011 and 2015 as well. What's your reaction?
Well, I think it's a failure of leadership by our Democratic presidents, obviously, in 2 administrations to do that. If they're letting Cuba do that, and on Cuban Independence Day of any day, who's next, Iran or China?
All right. I want to sort of get your take. You talk about the economy being top of mind of folks, but Florida has one of the highest inflation rates, if not the highest inflation rate, higher than the national average. Doesn't that fall more on problems with both the governor and the Florida legislature and not addressing those issues than it does on the president?
No, I don't think so at all. I think what you're having is you have massive inflation across the country, and then people are fleeing to Florida to get away from their Democratic regimes, which has in turn risen our housing prices and other things. So I think it's a fact that we're doing the things that are right. It's up to the administration to bring down inflation, bring down prices. But that's why it's worse here, is because of housing has pushed it forward.
I want to sort of get your impression on a couple of things. One of the things that's in the news as well here, it's about your predecessor, Christian Ziegler, the former chairman of the Republican Party. There has been a lot more new details that have come out surrounding his sex scandal involving his wife, Bridget, and he sort of hunting for women to participate in sexual trysts with the couple, going out to bars, taking pictures of women without them necessarily knowing about it, sending them back to his wife. What's your reaction to everything that went on and continues to come out with regard to your predecessor, Christian Ziegler?
Well, that is not the person that I thought I knew, so it shocked me also. But I think I would say that the party did the right thing by acting quickly to get rid of him, even when we didn't know all these details. And I think it was our decisive leadership of our board to move quickly so that these headlines are now our former chairman, not our current chairman.
Do you believe that Bridget Ziegler, who is a member of the Sarasota School Board, should resign her position?
I think Bridget's going to have to make that decision and do what she thinks best for her and her family. I'm going to leave that to the Ziegler household.
She's in that position as a Republican. You're chair of the Republican Party. How would you counsel her? Do you think that it would be better for her to step down?
I think it's a distraction, and you have to determine if that distraction's enough. I'm not going to make that call for her, but I think she needs to figure out if she's representing her constituency in an adequate way.
All right, you're in Israel, and I want to talk about that for a second, because we were supposed to do this interview about an hour ago, and then, of course, because of a rocket attack in Israel, your bus was delayed, and it took you time to get back to where you were able to do an interview. Talk to me about the trip that you're there and what you're seeing in Israel right now.
Well, it's very interesting to be here and see firsthand what the results of October 7th are on the people of Israel. And what I see is a society that wants to exist and wants to live in peace. And their desire to live in peace is being misconstrued by radicals in the Democrat Party and saying that they're doing horrible things. I mean, if American citizens were exposed to what these citizens are exposed to on a daily basis, they would want some peace and security in their homeland also.
Isn't that a danger, though? It's sort of what you just did there, by making it a partisan issue, by dividing Democrats and Republicans. I know of a lot of Democrats that are very supportive of Israel, and I know of some Republicans who are questioning some policies as well when it comes to funding for Israel and trying to hold it up at times. So doesn't Israel do best when politics is taken out of it? And I understand you're speaking as the chair of the Republican Party, so naturally a lot of it comes through that prism. But isn't that the danger that Israel wants to avoid, is that becoming a partisan fight in the United States?
Well, I don't think it's a partisan fight. What I think it is that there's a very small percentage of Democrats who've made this their issue, and that's not reflective of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. I think if you look at polling, 70 or 80% of our people support the Israelis as our partners and teammates in the world, and it's a small group of people that have taken over campuses that the current administration's let drive the agenda rather than what's in the best interest of our friends and allies.
Can you be supportive of Israel and also question the way they are prosecuting the war in Gaza, and questioning whether or not they are doing enough to protect civilian life? In other words, if you automatically question the Israeli government in terms of how they conduct the war, are you automatically anti-Semitic?
I wouldn't use those terms, but I think you can question things. But I think what I would tell people is what they're seeing on the news is not the reality day to day. You have people who are determined to wipe the Israelis off the face of the earth, and you have to govern yourself accordingly when you're here and when you're having to survive that on a daily basis.
All right, I only have about 45 seconds, and the first block of the show, we had Debbie Mucarsel-Powell on. She's running against Rick Scott. Rick Scott is also trying to be the Republican leader, rather presumptuous, assuming that he's going to be reelected. But I'll give you the last word on talking about, one, do you support Rick Scott's efforts to become a Republican leader? And two, how do you see the race between him and Debbie Mucarsel-Powell?
Rick Scott's going to win his reelection, and he's going to win it big. But I think, when you need a job done, you send someone from Florida. You look at the success we've had in Florida, and I think we need more Florida leadership on the national level.
All right. Evan, I always appreciate the fact that you get right to the point and are very succinct. So I appreciate that. Safe travels. Stay safe in Israel, and I look forward to having you in the studio at some point in the near future.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Evan. Bye.
Bye.
We'll be right back after the break. If you have any thoughts or comments, feel free to contact me at jdefede@cbs.com. I do enjoy hearing from you. Well, that's all the time we'll have. We'll be back again next week. Thanks again for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.